Hello and welcome back to another episode of Blurble Reasoning. Today we will be talking about the second book of the second Mistborn era, Shadows of Self, because I just bloody well went and finished it, didn't I? We will be talking full spoilers from the outset, so if for some reason you are clicking on a video about the second book of the second era of a long-running series, hoping to get non-spoiler thoughts about it, I would suggest you vamoose, but maybe stick around in the future for like a full spoiler-free discussion on the series so far. But yes, this book continues our adventures with Wax and Wayne, now a pair of Connies, also known as constables, within the city of Elendel. Well, they're just kind of like deputized citizens. They kind of have free will to go around and do as they may, but as long as it's like within the confines of the law and as long as it's within reason and stuff. Basically, they've got the Batman and Robin treatment, although Wayne's not much of a Robin. The defining feature of this book, I would say, that I'm going to remember looking back on it in future is the villain, which is one of the Kandra, who these people now call the Faceless Immortals, and the continued involvement of Sazed, also known as Preservation, also known as God, meddling in the affairs of society, trying to make the world a better place, and ultimately kind of causing imbalance and problems while doing so. I have one major problem with this book, and we're going to get it out of the way because the rest of the book kind of shines. And that's just that we learn who the villain is when Sazed just tells Waxillium. We just get told who the villain is. Sazed just contacts Waxillium through the earring and goes, hey, the person you're looking for is actually a conjurer who is wearing the face of someone, of bloody tan, who, kind of killed Lessie, obviously it's a bit more complicated than that. And while I get that this was necessary because this is Sazed being heavy-handed with his divinity, and that is a major theme of the book, at the time it was very much like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm getting the Cliff Notes version of the plot that is unfolding in front of me, except it's the actual plot. It was an extremely tell-heavy reveal of a villain, and yeah, I get that there's not really many other ways to do that, because how is Wax gonna come to his own conclusion about the fact that he's hunting a faceless immortal? It's kind of unlikely, right? It just felt a little weird and heavy-handed, and at the time I was a little bit not cool with it. But no, I really like the idea that in this era of Mistborn, the Conjurer are basically like the secret agents of God, and we've got one who's kind of pulled out one of her own spikes and gone rogue. She calls herself Bleeder. Her fellow Conjurer know her as, was it like Pun-Ul or something? And of course the reveal at the end of the book, Waxillium knows her as Lessie. I'm pleased to say that I called that ahead of time, because what's the meanest, cruelest, most gasp-worthy twist you could pull regarding a conjurer impersonating your loved one? It's that your loved one was actually a conjurer the whole time. I will say I feel so sorry for Wax at the end of this book. I'm so curious about what his character's going to be like going forwards, because good lord, that, like, going through accidentally killing the woman you love and then, like, having that be brought back up only to find out that the woman you love is the villain you've been hunting this entire time, and that you end up kind of killing her again. Oh my god, that poor man. He is downright traumatized at the end of this book, and it reflects so poorly on Sazed. And yet at the same time, we know that Sazed is trying to do the right thing. I think it's really interesting that TenSoon, I know TenSoon, we'll get to that in a minute. I think it's really interesting that TenSoon mentions to Nerisy that the whole idea is that Sazed is trying to balance everything, and he put the pain where it could be handled in Waxillium, and I think that's really interesting because Sazed has felt that very same pain, or maybe not the same pain as the woman you love turning out to be kind of an evil, cold-hearted, faceless immortal who's created wretched zombies of some variety, and that you've ended up, well, I mean, she ended up, doing it to herself, but you've ended up being the reason she dies. But Sazed does have experience mourning a loved one, and maybe that's why he thought, oh, Waxillium, he's a good man. I believe he can shoulder this burden. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I can't quite remember anymore if it was referenced that the Kandra still existed in the previous book, but I think it was a revelation in this book that the Kandra was still around. Like, I know they'd talked about the Kandra as faceless immortals in the previous book, but I don't remember, I'm sorry. But the revelation that they still exist was such a relief to me because I really liked the Kandra, and I think in this book, Brandon Sanderson made a funny aside about the bits about the Kandra dragging on a bit too long in the Words of Founding and being a bit boring, which I imagine is a bit of feedback he got about the final book of Mistborn. I actually really enjoyed learning about the Kandra in the final book of the first era of Mistborn. And when they all apparently died, I was very, very sad that that happened to them. So it was really cool to see that not just the Kandra, but Tensoon himself are still around. That was so great. When Tensoon's name was first dropped, I literally stopped everything, and my jaw hit the fucking floor. I was like, Tensoon? Did she just say Tensoon? I think it was Milan who was like, oh, Tensoon will be annoyed that I killed again, and I was Tensoon? Also, Michael Kramer gives Milan the Bearlane voice, and I think it's very well suited to her. If you don't listen to audiobooks and you've read both Wheel of Time and this book, just know that Bearlane has the same voice as Milan. But yeah, overall I thought this was a fantastic sequel to the first Wax and Wayne book. It was nice to see more of Nerisy and her burgeoning career within the constabulary, and how she's kind of setting up her own identity away from Waxillium. I mentioned at the last book, at the end of the last book, that I was kind of relieved that that romance didn't end up being an actual romance, and in this book we continue to have her establish her own identity away from this man, and I'm like, good, thank you. I think if a romance does blossom between them later on, it will be slightly less problematic now because she has gotten to know him a bit better. She no longer kind of worships him and deifies him and idolizes him. She's now, if anything, looking at him as more of a rival, and is kind of annoyed at the way he treats her and stuff. And as they work that out and end up actually seeing each other as equals, hey, maybe it could go from there. But that being said, I'm also noticing a growing appreciation from Waxillium for Steris, and I don't know, I could actually kind of see something growing there naturally as well. I'm going to like Steris more and more as these novels go on. I loved that scene between the two of them when they went to that party and he's talking about her nature and how she plans things out ahead of time, even witticisms that she might make at opportune moments to make him laugh, and he's like, that's not a flaw, that's just who you are. And that's great. She kind of presents as neurodivergent in that way, and I'm really starting to appreciate her more and more for it. It was interesting to see this story as well tackle the problems that are facing Elendel in regards to workers' rights and the growing discontent among the working class, and are they going to invoke for survivors' mandates and overthrow the government and the governor and all of this kind of stuff? And we see how Bleeder is using that and is kind of working behind the scenes to inflame that feeling, because she believes that much like, the Kandra and the Kolos, only those who feel extremely strong emotion are able to be freed from Harmony's influence. And I think we're starting to see a running theme throughout these books of common people feeling oppressed beneath the thumb of an even benevolent god, as benevolent as Harmony can be, who kind of dual wields preservation and ruin. Like, yes, Harmony has plans for the populace. He wants them to advance through the ages, and he wants to, quell as much suffering as possible, but that still, kind of rubs up against, problems of free will and letting the people be naturalistic in their own ways. And do they really need a god putting them on a particular path? Given that this book is written by a religious man, I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe that's not the direction that plotline is going to be heading ultimately, but it is an interesting question that I find myself asking. But that does dovetail into a revelation at the end of this book, that one of the spikes that Lessie was using was a unrecognized metal that even Harmony has not seen before, which implies the interference of a second god, which is really exciting exciting because that feels like Cosmere level storytelling. Like, who has shown up and started meddling with Scadrial and why? And with that final revelation at the end of this book, you start to understand why Sazed has been so heavy-handed with moving his agents and trying to stop Lessie. Like, why is this a level of event worthy of the attention of a god? And I also love Wax's growing discontent with being used as a pawn within these grander schemes as well, even for good, because it has ended up bringing him a sizable chunk of pain and trauma. And of course we've got the on-running story about that weird organization that Wax's uncle is part of, the the Set. And I don't know if this group is meant to derive its name from the character of Set from the First Era. I don't know if it's spelled differently. Unfortunately, I listened to the audiobooks, so I would appreciate anyone just making a quick clarification of a comment in the comments who does know about that. But yeah, events are heating up. I'm really excited to go into the third book, and I'm really curious to go into the third book because I don't know if it was originally meant to be the final book of a trilogy, because I know there is a fairly decent gap between the publication of the Bands of Mourning and is it called The Lost Metal, the fourth book? That is something I would not like to be told about, but I'm really interested in reading the third book and seeing if it feels like a finale, and then what the fourth book would look like after that, or if it's just the third adventure. This kind of like has the feel of a procedural cop drama to it, of like you've got this undercurrent of a plotline that goes across episodes and is the reason for why these individual villains keep doing the things that they're doing. But these novels very much are about, this book is about this villain and trying to track them down and stop them. This book is about this villain and trying to track them down and stop them. So I'll be interested to see if the Bands of Mourning is a culmination or not. I still don't know what the Bands of Mourning actually are. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. I don't think I'm supposed to, but I think I have a pretty good idea. Because at one point when Waxillium is visiting the museum on the Field of Rebirth, which is one of those caverns that got moved around that people, huddled in while the end of the world was happening, the Catasandra, as it is now called, we see an exhibit showing Sazed's original braces. They're called the Bands of something, but like they're linked to Harmony. Maybe they're called the Bands of Harmony, I don't actually remember. And then you also skip over and they're right next to the Bands of Mourning, and my ears perked up because I went, oh, the Bands of Mourning? That's the name of the next book. I have a theory that those are the braces that the Lord Ruler wore, and I'm curious to see how a story could be spun out around those. Also, while we were spending time with the survivorists, at one point in the story, as Bleeder was trying to manipulate the two churches against each other, there was a passing mention to the idea of like this lesser known bit of text regarding the idea that the survivor also ascended to godhood very briefly at one point, and that would have taken me very off guard and confused me a lot had I not already read Secret History, where that was revealed there as well. So I will say, so far I have absolutely no regrets having read Secret History before reading these books, because some people recommend reading it after Bands of Mourning for spoilers. I still don't really know what the major spoiler is for Bands of Mourning that I'm supposed to not know about, so I think it's fine. But I do kind of like reading these novels with this impression of what's going on behind the scenes too, or what went on behind the scenes, which might have ended up making this world the way it is. Like a lot of the stuff regarding the Lord Mistborn spook, talking about how he wrote about hemalurgy. I guess that would make sense if you hadn't read Secret History, but yeah, at the same time I'm like, yeah, I know why he was so interested in hemalurgy, because of something that was mentioned at the end of that novella, and I'm really excited to see how the behind the scenes stuff ties into the foreground story, assumedly towards the end of Bands of Mourning, because everyone says to read Secret History after Bands of Mourning. So yeah, anyway, that's all my thoughts on Shadows of Self, I suppose. Thanks very much for checking in. I doubt this video will get a lot of views because it is a mid-series book review video and those never get a lot of views, but I don't do this for the views. I do it to document my thoughts of these books at a time, and hopefully people find them interesting. So cheers for coming by, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.